18-year-old Kimberly Proctor was friends with the same small group of friends as Cruz Wellwood, 16, and Cameron Moffat, 17. They all attended Pacific Secondary School in the small town of Langford, BC. Kimberly had briefly dated a boy named Zach who was also part of the group, but like many teenage relationships, their relationship was very short-lived. Kimberly was heartbroken and would find solace chatting online with Cruz and Cameron. During one of these chats, Cameron confessed that he liked her. However, Kimberly politely said she wasn't interested. Her heart still belonged to Zach. Kimberly did start to get closer to Cruz though. They started talking online and on the phone nightly. In addition, the two started dating, but only for a very short time before Kimberly broke it off in a text message to him. She still wasn't over Zach yet and didn't see how that was fair to Cruz. This angered Cruz, who then began being extremely mean to Kimberly. He got Cameron involved as well, and the two would write her hurtful messages and she had no idea why. She asked them, but each time she was only met with more rude messages. Eventually, she just gave up trying to figure it out. Then, out of the blue, she received a message from Cruz. He wanted to know what she had been up to. He wanted to know if she wanted to meet up because he wanted to talk to her in person, to explain why he had been so mean to her recently. Kimberly said she was surprised to hear from him and she agreed to meet up with him the next day before she had to babysit. On March 18, 2010 at 10:30 a.m. she met Cameron and Cruz at the bus exchange. From there the three walked to Cruz's house since his mother was out at work. That was the last time anyone ever saw Kimberly again. Her charred remains would later be found off a trail under the Galloping Goose Bridge. Cameron and Cruz met in 5th grade. They were both misunderstood kids in their own eyes. Cameron said that Cruz might as well have been his brother and that he was the only one who ever got him. As the two got older, they began acting out. They started skipping school, smoking pot, surfing dark and sadistic porn sites and devouring any information they could about serial killers. They discovered that they both wanted to see what it would feel like to kill someone, and they discussed the rape and bondage fantasies each had to each other. On March 18th, the two decided that it was time to turn their sick fantasies into realities. Unfortunately, Kimberly would be their test subject. On the day that Kimberly went with Cameron and Cruz, this is what happened according to Cameron in his police interview. The night before, the two discussed their plans on MSN. While Cruz was talking to Kimberly, he was also talking to Cameron on MSN. The two wrote to each other things like, "I'm going to rip out her nose ring and burn it. Burn her flesh. Why not keep her bound and alive? That's what I'm going to do, but I need to get her stoned first and possibly seduce her." They even planned a code word which was KD. KD is a Canadian nickname for craft dinner. So once they got to the house, they were just sitting around talking. Then Cameron said Cruz said the code word and all hell broke loose. Cruz grabbed Kimberly and yelled at Cameron to get some duct tape. They then bound her arms and feet together. Cruz stuffed a sock in her mouth and wrapped duct tape around her head. Then the two beat and raped her for hours. At one point they put a plastic bag over her head and duct taped that around her as well. They mutilated her body with a knife and stuffed refuse and a 4-inch lollipop stick in her body. She eventually died of suffocation. Then they moved her body to the freezer out in the garage. Then Cameron tried to pursue one of his ex-girlfriends to come over and hang out. Thankfully the girl declined. After that, they went about their normal lives. Cameron visited with a relative and Cruz played World of Warcraft. He sent a message to Kimberly and asked her if she was finished babysitting. Of course, he knew exactly where she was and this was just a ruse. The next morning, the two put Kimberly's body in a hockey bag and boarded the bus. They got off at the Galloping Goose Trail and made their way out into the woods for a bit. Then they doused her body with gas and lit it on fire. Kimberly's body was found a short time later and an investigation team of more than 40 officers was dispatched to the case. Cruz ended up confessing to his girlfriend in Halifax, but he did it over World of Warcraft chat. Then, back over at MSN, he sent her links to newspaper reports. His girlfriend's response: "Just don't do it again." Cameron and Cruz also talked frequently over MSN about the murder. One message Cameron sent Cruz said, "Since we killed that bitch and it wasn't too hard, we should do it again." The police brought in both boys for questioning since they were friends of Kimberly's and hung out in the same crowd. Both said that they had seen her that morning, but then she left them to go to school. However, the police had been keeping an eye on all the internet activity of Kimberly's friends. Little did the boys know, they were incriminating themselves all over the internet. Soon, the police had enough evidence to secure the necessary judicial authorization to monitor and analyze all of the boys' online activities. They also bugged their homes, cell phones, and even the gazebo where they hung out in the park. They dug up their Google and Wikipedia searches, as well as old transcripts of texts and instant messages. In total, the Tech Crimes Unit amassed the equivalent of 1.4 billion sheets of paper on the two. The two were finally arrested on June 18. Rather than face a trial and jury, the two pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and indignity to human remains. The two were charged as adults and were both sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 10 years. The psychology reports were damning, suggesting a high probability of recidivism. Cruz was a sexual sadist of the rarest kind, especially for someone so young, a twisted kid who, against large odds, found understanding in another disturbed boy. Kimberly's parents would have preferred to see the boys die for their crime, but there is no death penalty in Canada. Kimberly's mother said, "Like when an animal is sick, you put them down, they're not even animals." I don't like to use that word because Kim was a huge animal person. These two are monsters. The sickest thing is the two's lack of remorse. In their police interviews, they don't shed a tear over what they did. It is rather quite scary. They said they were upset about getting caught and were not upset nor felt bad for Kimberly's family at all. On a trip to the courthouse, the two were unaware that they were being recorded in the van. It is pretty disturbing to listen to. The two laughed at their situation, discuss where they are going to end up and wonder if they will have access to a basketball court or TV. They laughed and made fun of the officers who were interviewing them, asking each other if they were asked if they felt any remorse. They talked about the conditions of their cells and how the murder had made news everywhere. They talk about their shoes and the handcuffs and how annoying they are. It was a rather lighthearted trip for them. Not a care in the world from either of them. In a taped conversation that Cruz made with his mother while in jail, he berates her and puts her down continuously. When his mother says, "You have to understand that I can't support you in any way. Like, if they were to put you on bail, I'm not gonna take you in the house. 'Cause I don't feel safe." Cruz's reply, "If you weren't safe you would already be dead." In conversations that Cameron has with his parents, they tell him to remember to try to keep in shape. To get a six-pack. His parents sent him a notebook and they told him, "Don't draw little guys running around with daggers stuck through their heads or stuff like that. That'll get you in shit." His mother also says, "If you feel bad about it you need to let people know you feel bad about it because this is a very bad thing." Cameron replies that his dignity is getting in the way of that. In a 9-hour police interview, Cameron claimed that Cruz was the mastermind. While Kimberly was bound and taped, he said that Cruz wanted him to rape her. Cameron claims, "He was instructing me to do it repeatedly," Moffat says. "At one point, he shuts me in his room with her and he's like, 'Do it,' and I'm like, 'I'm not.' Eventually, he's just screaming and stuff." Regardless of the truth, these two little pricks are disgusting. I just can't believe the lack of remorse. It is scary to think that if they had already killed someone when they were 16 and 17, what would they have done by the time they were 21? In a rather not surprising twist, Cruz Wellwood had been raised by his single mother for most of his life because his father is in jail serving a life sentence himself. In 2001, his father sexually assaulted and beat to death a 16-year-old girl in Merritt, BC. I guess the apple really doesn't fall far from the tree in that family. Both boys were diagnosed as high-risk offenders and psychopaths with little chance of rehabilitation. The boys also had no motive other than wanting to see what it was like to rape and kill someone. They said they chose Kimberly because she was an easy target.